270 needed, and these are the latest calls by NBC News, our projections of winners. No surprise, Illinois 21 in the John Kerry column. New Jersey, that was an outstanding question for a time in the closing days of the campaign. It stays Democratic, 15 electoral votes. Massachusetts, his home state, no surprise, 12 votes. Maryland, another strong Democratic state, 10 electoral votes. In Tennessee, George Bush territory once again. Alabama, the solid Republican South, George Bush territory. Back to New England and Connecticut, 7 electoral votes to the Kerry column. In Oklahoma and the Southwest, George W. Bush, 7 electoral votes. In Maine, they have a proportional representation, 4 electoral votes. We're only awarding 3 based on the returns that we're seeing here tonight. The District of Columbia, which is almost always safely in the Democratic column, is again this year, and so is the state of Delaware, the home state of Joe Biden, one of Senator John Kerry's closest friends and closest advisors, and will have probably a major role. So this is what the map looked like just a few moments ago. Dramatic changes now beginning to occur. Remember, red for the president, blue for John Kerry. John Kerry with 77 electoral votes, and George Bush with 66. They need to get to 270, and there are some tantalizing states out there that are just too early to make a call or too close to make a call. We want to share those with you right now as well. Those are the states that you can see in Missouri and Arkansas, Ohio, North Carolina, big surprise there. South Carolina, another big surprise, too early to make a call. Florida and Ohio are the 2 keys there, Tim Russert. Those are the states that are probably going to drive results before this night is out.
Absolutely, Tom. The Republicans had hoped they could pick up New Jersey because of its proximity to New York, the concern about terrorism, but it looks like John Kerry's going to win that state comfortably. Now, what does that tell us about some of the other states like Pennsylvania and Michigan, Wisconsin? We don't know. But if Kerry can hold that Democratic state like New Jersey, those swing independent suburban voters, it's got to make him very happy as he looks towards Pennsylvania and other states.
How unnerved do you think that the Bush people are by the fact that Virginia is still outstanding now almost an hour after the polls have closed there?
Very. And the Kerry campaign, Tom, pulled out their paid advertising a few weeks ago, didn't think they could contest it the way they are tonight. That would be a nice little chunk of electoral votes to have in your pocket.
Virginia has a popular Democratic governor these days, a young guy by the name of Mark Warner. And then you go down to North Carolina, it's John Edwards' home state. He was a very popular senator, just one term. And North Carolina, we still can't make a call there as well. And we're not saying that they're going to the Kerry column, but the fact that it's going to be that close is probably causing some shallow breathing on the Republican side.
And an indication that people who were considered to be automatically for George Bush are holding back and perhaps casting the lots with John Kerry. And maybe again, Tom, this may be this young voter turnout, which we have seen rather dramatically in Bryant Williams' exit polls.
All right, let's take a look. We're approaching 20% of the vote counted in Virginia thus far. And as you can see, that shows a wide disparity in the raw vote. But that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at historic models and the exit polling that is going on there. We can't make a call in Virginia yet based on what we're seeing, even though it looks like the president's got a 16-point lead at this point. You know, Tim, what's so interesting to me about these 2 candidates, and I talked about it a fair amount during the campaign, here are 2 sons of privilege who were raised by distinguished families in the Northeast. They went to the 2 of the best prep schools in America, Andover and St. Paul's. They were at Yale at the same time, members of a secret society. They went in distinctly different directions after they left Yale University, and they come around now to meet each other. I was counting up their degrees the other day. This is an argument for a good education. 2 degrees from Yale, 1 from Harvard, and 1 from Boston College.
And with that common gene and an educational pool, 2 disparate set of values and positions on issues. Tom, you go down tax policy, economic policy, environmental policy, education policy, Iraq. These men are like this. The only thing that unifies them are skull and bones. Skull and Bones will still keep control of the presidency.
We still haven't found out whether, when they met on the stage at those debates, whether they gave each other the old secret Skull and Bones handshake, and that may stay secret forever, for all we know.
Well, if you mention Skull and Bones in their presence, they're supposed to leave the room.
Right.
But they both stayed at their podiums.
They did indeed. Let's go to NBC's Kelly O'Donnell, who has a little more for us tonight on John Kerry's travels. Has he finally stopped campaigning, by the way, Kelly?
Yes, the campaigning has now officially ended for John Kerry about 10 minutes ago. He's been home in Boston for 8 hours, but just those few minutes ago, finally left the office he's been using at a hotel here in Boston to go to his Beacon Hill home. He took off the microphone from his tie after doing about 4 hours worth of interviews, 38 interviews to 30 different local stations across the country in key battleground states, cities, and markets that the campaign felt was important. He'll have some time this evening to watch returns and to relax. The first time he's been in his own surroundings in weeks, first time outside the battleground. He has had on the road with him in the last few days some of his longtime friends, old college roommate, his former brother-in-law, who he has remained close with over the years, friends of Teresa Heinz Kerry as well, and of course his sister and brother have been with him. So increasingly over the last few days, there's been more of a family coming together. Both of his daughters are with him as well, and Teresa Heinz Kerry, who's been campaigning separately, of course, is with him as well. So there'll be some family time now. Also, in watching him in the last day or two, he has also taken a little more time to play his guitar in the front cabin of the aircraft, taking a little more time to relax. But when I asked him, do you have a sense of ever just looking around and seeing the moment of where you are after all this campaigning, he was quick to say no, that he had to keep working until the last votes were cast, until he could do no more. Apparently, they've determined that time has come because the senator has stopped campaigning and has gone home to await the results. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Kelly O'Donnell. The senator has had 9 lives during the course of this campaign. It was about a year ago at this time that one of his greatest friends from the United States Senate, who was then out of the Senate, said he was prepared to go to him and tell him to drop out, that he could become Howard Dean's Secretary of State if he would help him out. Of course, he didn't drop out. He took out a mortgage on his home. He helped finance his own campaign, reorganized himself, and won in the state of Iowa, and then went, in effect, to clean the table and win the Democratic nomination. We want to show you now the states that have been won by the president so far tonight. It's coming up in 10 minutes after 8 here in the east, so the polls are beginning to close. Alabama, Georgia, Indiana, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Tennessee, West Virginia. No surprises, although a reassuring win in West Virginia for the Republicans. For John Kerry, Connecticut, Delaware, District of Columbia, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, a sigh of relief on that one, and the state of Vermont up in New England. Now, this is the raw vote that we're seeing thus far in Florida. 1/5 of the vote is in at this time. And again, we remind you, we make a projection based on models in precincts, and what we're seeing from exit polling. The raw vote that has been counted thus far shows George W. Bush with a commanding lead. But at the White House, and certainly in the Bush family, they know that this is going to be very close in the state of Florida. Jeb Bush, obviously, is the governor of the state of Florida. He's the younger brother of the president of the United States. And 4 years ago, when it was so close, and the president almost didn't win Florida in the eyes of a lot of Democrats. In fact, he didn't win it. But one of the other Bush brothers said to me, if we hadn't won Florida, it was going to be a pretty chilly Thanksgiving. We'll be back with more from Democracy Plaza, Decision 2004, right after this.
Decision 2004 election night coverage is sponsored in part Thursday.
We're back at Democracy Plaza, and we want to remind you it's not just the presidency that's at stake tonight. It is also control of the United States Senate and the House of Representatives. Democrats at the outset of this campaign had hoped to regain the Senate. They have picked up a seat tonight based on our projections. One of the new stars in the Democratic Party, we're going to show you in the state of Illinois. He was an electrifying speaker at the Democratic Convention, Barack Obama. We'll be hearing a lot more from Barack Obama in the course of the next several years. In Alabama, no surprise there, Richard Shelby, an outspoken member of the Republican Party, going back to the United States Senate. In the state of Connecticut, another old Democratic warhorse, Chris Dodd, closest friend of Senator Edward Kennedy, going back a seat that his father once held. Barbara Mikulski, Democrat in the state of Maryland, being returned. Kit Bond, the incumbent in Missouri, being reelected by his fellow Missourians. And in New Hampshire, Judd Gregg, the incumbent, he has been reelected. So one pickup in that run for the Democrats, but they appear to be in some trouble in some other states. These are the electoral votes as we have them at this hour. John Kerry, 77 to George Bush's 66. The states filled in red for the president, and blue for John Kerry. We're going to go to Tampa now, and one of the boy wonders of the Republican Party, although he's getting almost to an advanced age for us to call him a boy wonder, even though his appearance will always belie his age, and that's Ralph Reed. Mr. Reed, let me ask you, first of all... I can't hear anything. Can you hear me? We got a problem. Can you hear me now, Ralph?
I can't hear anything.
I think we'll get back to him in a moment. You could hear the static bleeding through there. Looking at those Senate races and what's to come later tonight, it doesn't appear that the Democrats are going to be able to get where they had hoped to before the night was out. Republicans ran a very smart senatorial campaign.
There are 51 Republicans, Tom, and we had 48 Democrats, 1 independent. The Democrats had to clearly win some seats. The Zeller Miller seat is gone. That's now Republican. Barack Obama does pick up Illinois, but there are a lot of other contested seats in North Carolina and South Carolina, which will be tough for the Democrats to hold on to. We'll see those results pretty soon. Most everyone I talk to all day long believes that the Republicans may gain a seat or may stay even. The Democrats' dream, of course, is to have a 50-50 Senate. Elect John Kerry and John Edwards president vice president, and John Edwards would break that tie and organize in favor of the Democrats.
All right, let's go to NBC's Campbell Brown now, because there are governor's races out there as well tonight, Tim, and Campbell's got some results for us on that. Campbell?
That's right, Tom. There are 11 gubernatorial elections being held tonight. About 6 of those are toss-ups, and we are able to project winners in a couple of states, beginning with North Carolina. The Democratic governor, we are projecting Mike Easley, will go on to a second term, defeating his challenger, Republican State Senator Patrick Ballantyne. North Carolina, a conservative state, but Easley had gotten high marks from voters there for bringing up test scores in public schools and improving the economy overall. So again, he will go on to a second term, Mike Easley. In the second state, Tom, West Virginia, again, we are calling it for the Democrat. Secretary of State Joe Manchin projected to win there again, defeating his Republican opponent, Monty Warner. This had been a state where Republicans had high hope, but the Republican in this case not able to really gain any traction. Again, that state going to the Democrat. There are many other states where the polls have closed already: Vermont, Indiana, Delaware, New Hampshire, and Missouri, but in all of those cases, it's either too early or too close to call, so we will keep watching. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Campbell Brown, who appears to be in her ice skating outfit, so once the evening is over, she can get back down on the ice here for us tonight. Tim, we don't know the size of the turnout, but that may be critical before this night is out. How large a mass of new voters decided to get involved this time?
Republicans had hoped it'd be 110 million, based on 105 showing up in 2000. Increased population. Democrats were dreaming about 120 million or more. But Tom, what we keep going back to, looking at some of these, what voters told us as they were leaving the voting booths, in Ohio, voters under the age of 30, 60% for John Kerry. In Florida, under the age of 30, 63% for John Kerry. We don't know how many of those there are. But clearly, if the young voters are turning out in significant numbers, it's extremely good news. Also, the swing independent voters in Ohio and Florida, Kerry breaking 60. Again, how many are there? How many of those are new registrants? And how does that compare to the strong Republican base of George Bush and the strong Democratic base of John Kerry?
Let's catch up with NBC's David Gregory now, who's at the White House where the President and Mrs. Bush are on the phone, I would guess, a lot tonight, and probably watching some returns as well. David?
They are, Tom. You can get a sense of the scene here tonight. There's something like between 30 and 35 guests that they have in the residence. And they've got monitors up. They've got a large buffet dinner. And I've even got detail on the menu, which I'll spare you for the moment. But if you can imagine this, Karl Rove, who the president doesn't want to let very far away from him, is set up in the old family dining room to track results. He shuttles between there and over in the Roosevelt room in the West Wing, where they've got a command center set up. The president has been on the phone with strategists and his campaign manager in Arlington, Virginia, at their campaign headquarters. In addition, talking to his brother Jeb down in Florida to track those results as well. So this follows a day, and Kelly O'Donnell talked about the efforts of Senator Kerry to campaign to the last moment. I mean, the president going to Columbus, Ohio today, he even got on the phone at some point, had to convince voters it was really him on the phone, trying to get him out to vote. And they had set up in Ohio, they were keeping us on Air Force One today so that he could do a series of satellite interviews like Senator Kerry has been doing with Florida stations. But in the Ohio rain, even with a cable strung up to the satellite truck off the side of Air Force One, the rain caused technical difficulties. They had to cancel those interviews. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC. David Gregory. That's one of the few times when the electronic wizardry of Air Force One and the White House may have failed the president today as he tried to get in some final licks in the state of Florida. So here's where we stand now on the electoral map. Just before we tell you we'll be going away in a moment. John Kerry 77, George Bush 66. Some surprises there, South and North Carolina, Virginia, we still can't make a call there. Ohio, obviously, and Florida. The two big states, part of the trifecta with Pennsylvania in the Eastern time zone. Back with more from Democracy Plaza. Decision 2004 in a moment. Half the states in America now have closed their polls. The decisions have been made by voters representing 269 electoral votes. And there are some surprises out there, in addition to the ones that we had anticipated. We're going to begin, first of all, and show you a three-way board in the state of Florida. This is the raw vote. Now 23% of the vote has been counted there. George Bush has a commanding lead in that raw vote, but it really depends on where these votes come from, we have to tell you again and again. Ralph Nader seems not to be much of a factor as he was last time in Florida, but of course we know that Miami comes in later and West Palm Beach comes in later. We're going to call...
That's important, Tom, because in 2000, Nader got 90,000 votes.
Right.
And he's only tracking about 30,000 now.
Yep, right. So the state of Virginia, 29% of the people, 29% of the precincts have been counted thus far. Again, the same caveat, we don't know where those votes are. We do have a winner now in the state of North Carolina. Big sigh of relief and probably a cheer in the living quarters of the White House. George Bush is the winner of the 15 electoral votes in North Carolina, the home state of John Edwards. He was unable to carry that. Not many people thought that he would, but they thought it was maybe a little bit like drawing to an inside straight, that they had a slim chance at best. So that's the map as we see it at this point. The map still is filling in about how we expected it to. Republicans thought maybe they could get New Jersey. They did not. Democrats had hoped maybe they could get West Virginia back this time. They did not. So we keep coming back to those same states, Tim.
Ohio, Florida, Florida. You know, North Carolina, Virginia, they're enticing, Tom. Bill Clinton always wanted to win Virginia. He came within 4 points one time, 2 points another time, but they always keep moving the football. And the Democrats, I think rather wisely decided, let's not spend a lot of money and time. Let's focus on Ohio and Florida, and that's why those states are deadlocked tonight. And
we don't want to leave out now the other states as we move west that are battleground states. You move to the upper Midwest, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. Iowa's a field of dreams for both candidates this time.
Absolutely right, Tom. And those are the states that are still very much in play. As you look at them right here, 53 electoral votes, 56 for Bush, 53 for Kerry. These are the ones that can be contested, if you will. And once one of these candidates wins one of their opponent's states, you take it off the board, it really does start to lock that electoral college door.
Tim, we're going to find out in a few moments what happens in Bill Clinton's old home state of Arkansas. He came off his post-operative bed, as it were, and went off and campaigned. And Arkansas will be closing its polls in about 8 minutes. We'll be back with more from Democracy Plaza, Decision 2004. We're back now, and you're looking at 30 Rockefeller Plaza here in New York as one more way of showing you what is necessary tonight. George W. Bush crawling up 30 Rockefeller Plaza with that streamer in red, 81 electoral votes. As we pull out, you can see John Kerry appropriately on the left with 77 electoral votes. We have a lot of ways of showing you that tonight, both electronically. All right, we're going to call the state of South Carolina. It took longer than we thought it might, but it stays safely in the Republican column. George W. Bush, our projected winner of the 8 electoral votes in South Carolina. So let us take you to the map now. That's how it was just a moment ago. It changes as we fill in South Carolina. George Bush goes up to 89 electoral votes at this time. Still some distance from 270. And so far, both candidates are getting all the states that we expected them to. Going into tonight, The conventional wisdom was that George Bush was at about 222 and John Kerry was about 207, of course, with those 9 to 11 battleground states that are still out there. There have been some voting problems, and we want to talk about that by first going to the state of Florida and NBC's Kerry Sanders. Kerry, what's going on down there now this time?
Well, Tom, I think it really is going to boil down to the absentee ballots. Not so much a problem in how they were delivered, but really having them all counted. If it is a close race, and of course Florida 4 years ago was only 537 votes, then the absentee ballots are going to become very important because more than 1 million were sent out and then returned to the actual supervisor of elections across the state. To give you an example, in Palm Beach County, they have already received 70,000 absentee ballots. As you come a little bit further south into the Fort Lauderdale area, there are 96,000 absentee ballots that have been returned. I'm actually in the location where those absentee ballots, and more will be coming in tonight. They have not even begun to count those yet. They have to then certify them. They have to make sure that people didn't double vote. Then they have to open up the envelopes and go through that. And then down in Dade County, they have about 94,000. They have begun to look at them there, but have only gotten through about a third of the 94,000. What that all means just in these urban counties to the south is it's going to take some time. So if it is a close race in Florida, in all likelihood, we may not be able to determine whether there is a winner in Florida tonight because those absentee ballots will still be out there. The chairman of the Kerry Edwards campaign is here with us, Congressman Kendrick Meek. Conventional wisdom would suggest, because the Republicans have done a stronger push for absentee ballots, that it would lean towards them. Your reaction?
Well, in all 3 counties, you have touchscreen counties. A lot of folks decided to use absentee ballots, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, because they wanted a paper trail. So we may not see what we've noticed historically as it relates to Republicans being the winner of absentee ballot voting. You have Palm Beach County, which is a heavily Democratic county. Broward County, which we're in now, is a heavily Democratic county. And also in Miami-Dade County, we're very, very competitive. So the night is early, and we'll see. And in Florida, automatic recount within a 1% margin here in the state.
Exactly. And of course, the automatic recount would kick in, as he said. And that's without even calling for a recount. Across the state, there are still some polls open, people waiting in line, but those lines are now dwindling. But all the polls have officially closed. People had to be in line by 7 o'clock. And there are 2 time zones, of course, in the state, Tom. So those polls are now closed except for the folks who are waiting to get through those final lines.
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Kerry Sanders in Florida. 26% of the vote has been counted in Florida so far. Again, a reminder to you, we based our projection on models from a variety of precincts across the state. We can't tell you for sure where that vote is coming from, but traditionally, Dade County, which is Miami, and then Palm Beach and West Palm Beach up the coast of Florida come in a bit later, so that will probably be altered before the course of this night. Let's go to NBC's Chip Reed now, down in our Making Your Vote Count Center. Chip?
Well, hi, Tom. I'm going to take you from Florida up to Ohio once again. Ohio has been litigation central today. Numerous lawsuits filed there. For example, earlier today there was one when people would show up at the polling place. If they had applied for an absentee ballot, that would show up on the records, and they were not allowed to vote provisionally. Well, the Democrats took that to court. The judge overruled it and said, look, if you show up, no matter what the circumstances, if there's any question about your right to vote, you get to cast a provisional ballot, and we'll determine after Election Day whether or not that counts. And now I'm joined by Rick Pildes of NYU Law School and an NBC legal analyst, and another very interesting legal case coming out of Ohio. Tell me about this one.
Well, we've had these voters in these very long lines in Ohio.
3-4 hours, even 6 hours
long. And we have dozens of affidavits from these voters filed in federal court asking to be allowed to cast a paper ballot instead of waiting 4 hours in line. A federal judge has now says that's right. They have a right to cast those ballots by paper ballot. People have been leaving the polls in Ohio because the lines are so long. This is an effort to take care of that problem.
Give me an idea of how extraordinary this is. This isn't asking to vote provisionally. This is asking to create on the spot a new system for voting so that people don't just get up and leave the line and walk away.
It's a product of the tremendous turnout in Ohio, the lack of enough machines to deal with the number of people at the polls, and a provisional remedy being created on the spot to allow these people to vote and to stop deterring people from actually casting a ballot.
So we have some creative judging going on in Ohio. We'll see if it sticks or if it gets appealed. Is it going to be appealed? Or
we don't know if it's going to be appealed or not yet, but these people are probably voting right now with these paper ballots.
Extraordinary. So Ohio, litigation central tonight, Tom.
Thank you very much, Chip Reed. We want to remind you that a federal judge has issued a temporary restraining order in Philadelphia. Absentee ballots can't be counted there until 9:30 tomorrow morning. That was a result of an appeal from the Republican Party saying they didn't have access to those absentee ballots. So there will be litigation across the country, and we may not have a resolution of the presidential race before the night is out as a result of all of that. Let's go to Tampa, Florida now. Well, first of all, we have a Senate race for you in Oklahoma. This one stays in the Republican column. Tom Coburn, the winner, a former U.S. House of Representatives member, a doctor who had kind of a scorched earth policy in the course of his campaign, very conservative, lots of controversies. A woman said that she'd been sterilized without her permission. And he had a lot to say about sexuality and sexual orientation in the state of Oklahoma as well, Tim.
Tom, you ran against Congressman Brad Carson. It was a tight race for some time. No one ever thought it would be competitive to replace Don Nichols, but Coburn has now prevailed, and that's an important hold for the Republicans.
All right. We're going to go to Tampa, Florida. We tried to just a few moments ago, and we had some technical difficulties. We're back now with Ralph Reed, who's one of the architects of the Republican Party's entree into the conservative Christians of this country, what is called the cultural conservatives. Mr. Reed, the president is running very strongly tonight among people who say that moral values were important to them. But can that be a double-edged sword? Can it drive other people away from the president?
No, I don't think so, Tom. In fact, right here in Florida along the I-4 corridor, with about 25% of the vote in, the president is overperforming versus 4 years ago in some of those more centrist and ticket-splitting suburbs. And we think the reason why is because the activity and the energy that we were able to harness among the core supporters of this president, 102,438 volunteers here in Florida. They contacted 1.5 million voters in the last 4 days, and because of their efforts, the Sunshine State's going to be in the president's column again tonight.
Let me ask you about something that happened in the last 10 days or so in the campaign that surprised a lot of people. The man you used to work for, Pat Robertson, told Paul Azan on CNN that he had an Oval Office conversation with the president warning him against the war in Iraq, and according to Reverend Robertson, the president said there will be no casualties. That got a lot of circulation. The president denied that conversation ever took place. What was going on with Pat Robertson in that conversation?
Tom, I don't know. I wouldn't really feel comfortable speculating. I wasn't in the meeting. What I can tell you is I know this president, and this president is someone who, as commander-in-chief, when he sends American men and women into battle, he does so reluctantly, as a last resort and not a first resort, and with the full knowledge that there could be casualties.
All right, thanks very much, Ralph Reed, who's in Florida tonight and just predicted that Florida will be in the president's column before the night is out. When we come back in a moment, a man who in many ways made John Kerry the nominee of the Democratic Party, former Vermont Governor Howard Dean. He'll be with us in a moment here at Democracy Plaza. Decision 2004, back in a moment. Back now with former Vermont Governor Howard Dean, the man who set the terms in the early stages of the Democratic race for the presidential nomination. When you began to run, you said, I represent the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party. And that really did alter the DNA of the race in many ways. But if John Kerry wins at the end of the night, can he govern as a representative of the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party, or does he have to move much more to the center?
I'm optimistic, but I just want to say right now, I hope all those listeners or viewers in Oregon and California are still going to get out to vote in Colorado, because those are close states. No, I think John Kerry can govern and will govern. I think he'll do a terrific job governing because the public is behind him. They want change, and that's what this election's about.
As you and I continue to talk, let me just do a little business here. The state of Virginia, which was too close to call early on, it's going to say in the Republican column, you can color it red, no surprise really.
Not a surprise.
13 electoral votes in the state of Virginia, the Old Dominion. Democratic Governor Mark Warner, very popular down there, but that stays in President Bush's column. So again, probably a sigh of relief from the Republican side and a little gosh darn it on the Democratic side.
Well, I think that we know what the 4 or 5 really key states are. It's Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, Ohio. 3 out of 4, and whoever gets that wins the whole thing.
Let's go back to what John Kerry does if he wins, and we don't know whether he will or not. Or even if the president wins. Should we have a fusion government in this country? Should we be reaching out more to find common ground?
We should. The problem is that the president is so far extreme to one side that there isn't much common ground. I don't think there's any constituency in the Democratic Party for running $500 billion deficits. I don't think there's a big constituency in the Democratic Party for doing what the president's done with the environment. So it is going to be very difficult. I think if the president is reelected. We'll see. The voters haven't spoken yet. I have enormous respect for the voters, and hopefully tonight John Kerry will win and they'll have made the right choice.
Well, in fairness to the president, the Concord Coalition, which is a bipartisan group, has looked at John Kerry's spending plans and his income plans, and they think his deficit will be in the $1 trillion plus range as well.
The key is that John Kerry voted for a balanced budget at some peril to himself without a single Republican vote. Republicans borrow and spend, borrow and spend. They're not the party of fiscal responsibility anymore. The Democrats are.
You going to run for office again?
I don't know, but hopefully not till 2012 after the second term of the Kerry administration.
All right. Thanks very much, Howard Dean, for being with us tonight.
Tom, thanks very much.
A long and interesting year for you.
It was.
And you made it interesting for the rest of us as well.
Thank you.
Let's go to Lisa Myers now, who's at the Republican National Headquarters in Washington, and she's gotten a brief down there from what they expect. Lisa, what are they telling you?
Tom, a potentially significant development here. Bush campaign officials say they've been comparing the actual voting returns that have come in from the states against the exit polls. And they claim that the votes that are coming in are much better for Bush than the exit polls have been. They believe that the Bush vote has been underrepresented in key states. They specifically cite Virginia, which I believe we just called, Florida, and South Carolina. They're feeling much better about Florida now than some people were earlier in the evening, Tom.
Lisa, why do they think that the exit polls have been misrepresented? We heard earlier that they thought women were overrepresented. Is that what they're continuing to say?
Nationally, they believe women are overrepresented, and also that they are not leading, do not hold as large a lead among men as they found in some of the final public polls. In the other areas, they really can't explain why the exit polls, in their view, is so off, but they're particularly encouraged about what they see in the critical I-4 corridor in Florida between Orlando and Tampa. It's a big swing vote area. They say they're doing better than they did in 2000, and better there than in the exit polls are now showing.
All right, thanks very much. NBC's Lisa Myers, who will be at that post all night long, will be coming back to you as well to get an update from what the Republicans are saying. Children are always an important part of a presidential campaign, and this year we had so much unique symmetry. It turns out President Bush and Senator Kerry and Dick and Lynn Cheney all are the parents of 2 daughters apiece. And one of Senator Kerry's daughters joins us now, the eldest daughter, Vanessa. She's taken leave from Harvard Medical School to join us. When you began this enterprise more than a year ago, were you reluctant to get out there and become such a public figure, especially leave medical school?
Actually, not at all. It was my choice to join this campaign. I was not asked to. Being a medical student, I was on the wards and I was talking to patients, and I was discovering that it's not myth that patients were really picking between paying their electricity bill or paying for prescription drugs. I've worked in the emergency room. I've seen the number of people coming through the door who are much sicker than they should be because they don't have access to primary care. I've worked overseas and I've done childhood immunization, and I've been involved in the environment, a number of things. And I just realized that everything I cared about was at stake in this election, and that I was in a unique position to help. I was raised by parents that taught me to be involved, to take a stand, and to fight for something you believe in. And I believe in better leadership than what we've had in the last 3.5 years.
What was the
I actually announced.
I was just going to ask, what was the toughest moment for you as a daughter, as your father came under withering criticism, as George Bush did from the other side? But for you,
it's always hard.
When they were talking about your dad.
Well, it's always hard to see someone you love be under criticism, but I think the hardest part for me was that they were blatant lies. It came out after 3 weeks of sort of lies. It came out that, the Swift boat attacks were wrong, and a lot of other things have been misleading and have been misnomers, and I find it frustrating because I think this country wants to talk about what's going on, wants to talk about the issues, about the rising cost of health care, not so much character assassination. This is why young people have been turned off of politics traditionally. And it's sort of a bummer, if you'll take the colloquialism, because I think young people want to be, they want to be told the truth, they want to be spoken to honestly, and they want to see that their leaders are really talking about things that matter and just sort of speaking straight up, to use another colloquialism. And I think that it would be better, more young people would be involved, and it is our future on the line. So I thank every young person who's been out there to vote today, every young person who's going to vote, because they could determine the next president of the United States.
Any chance at the end of all this you'll get together with the Bush daughters and share a margarita?
I've had a chance to meet them at the third debate, and they seem really nice. There is a strange sorority in being in this position, just because it is a unique position. Unfortunately, I get to go back to school when this is all over and hit the books again.
All right, thanks very much, Vanessa Carey tonight, who is going back to medical school, as a matter of fact. We'll have more from Democracy Plaza, Decision 2004, right after this. We're back. This is one of the states that we'll be watching very carefully all night long, just as we were 4 years ago. More than a third of the vote has been counted in Florida. It's still too close to call, even though the raw vote shows a commanding lead for the president. Other precincts in more democratic parts of Florida have not been counted yet. So we want to give you an update on all of that. And go now down to NBC's Brian Williams, who is in the NBC News Decision 2004 Tracking Center. He's been looking at the exit polls. Brian, what are the people saying as they come out of the polls in Florida about why they voted the way they did?
Well, Tom, we're getting some astounding and fascinating stats out of Florida tonight, which, of course, kept us up late 4 years ago. Despite adding 1.5 million registered voters over the last 4 years, the Sunshine State is again too close to call at poll closing. Both candidates worked Florida hard, and this is fascinating. Over half of Florida voters said they were contacted and asked to vote for a particular presidential candidate. That costs money. Both campaigns were equally energetic. 37% said they were contacted by the Kerry campaign, 34% by the Bush camp. Some got calls from both. Florida was, of course, one of the states where people took advantage of early voting. Over 1 million Floridians cast ballots before today, 1 in 5. Both groups were evenly divided between President Bush and Senator Kerry. Now, if John Kerry does manage to pull it out in Florida, it will be on the strength of first-time voters. And here's this stat in Florida. They made up 13% of the Florida electorate. They broke strongly for John Kerry, a margin of 59 to 40%. Tom?
Thanks very much, NBC's Brian Williams. Former mayor, a Democrat of the city of New York, Ed Koch, went down there to campaign. He said, "I'll die a liberal, but I haven't lost my sanity." And the Reverend Lennox Yearwood, a black preacher, said, "All souls to the polls. We're going to bang that ballot box this year." It was all-out war in the state of Florida. Back from Democracy Plaza after this.
Decision 2004, Election Lights. Here is Tom Brokaw.
9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and 15 more states, from the New York Island to the deserts of Arizona and many states in between, 13 altogether, representing 159 electoral votes, have closed their polls. In Texas, the homeboy wins his own state, the former governor of Texas, George W. Bush. In New York, no surprise, 31 electoral votes for John Kerry. In Kansas, the heartland, a big red state, 6 votes for George Bush. Nebraska, same thing, another big red state, quite literally, 5 votes. North Dakota, more Bush territory, 3 electoral votes. South Dakota, 3 electoral votes. We'll be watching the Thune-Daschle race there later on. In Wyoming, the home of Alan Simpson, 3 electoral votes. And in Rhode Island, back on the East Coast, John Forbes Kerry, who sailed off Rhode Island, he gets the 4 electoral votes there. So here's the map now as it stands, as it was just a moment ago, and as we fill it in. You can see John Kerry, 112 electoral votes, George Bush, 156. But the keys are still down there in the southeast, in Florida, in the industrial Midwest, in Pennsylvania and Ohio. The polls have been closed in both those states for some time. Wisconsin and Michigan have been closed as well in this last hour. We still can't call them too close, too early. There it is. There is the presidency, ladies and gentlemen. Somewhere in those states, the electoral votes that will go to one candidate or the other will determine who occupies 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the most powerful office in the world for the next 4 years. Will it be George W. Bush going back for 4 more years, or will it be Senator John Kerry? Tim?
Tom, you called states. They're all important, but the ones you didn't call were more important. If we can talk in terms of the Electoral College. Pennsylvania, the polls have been closed since 8 o'clock. Al Gore won that state by 5 points 4 years ago. Bill Clinton won it twice by 9 points. The Kerry people need that Pennsylvania in their corner. It's a linchpin. Also, we're waiting to hear from Minnesota and Wisconsin, 2 key states in the Great Lakes there. Kerry must hold those states, because if he can, then his strategy is to win Ohio and win the presidency.
Going into this election, Tim, we said it would be close, and we did not lie.
It is unbelievable. We thought 2000 would be a once-in-a-lifetime story to cover. You're 2 for 2, Brokaw, in the last 2 presidential elections.
Well, we'll see, because in any one of those states, a few hundred votes could mean a big electoral victory as well. We want to remind everyone of that. If it just slides across to one side or the other, and somebody sweeps Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida by just a few hundred votes, they get a ton of electoral
300
votes.
electoral votes?
Right.
It'll be considered a very sizable majority.
All right, let's go to the White House now. NBC's David Gregory. What are they thinking there, David?
Well, no surprise over here, Tom, that the president's working the phones from the residence. He congratulating some winners in Senate races across the country, calling Johnny Isakson down in Georgia to congratulate him on his victory. More importantly to the president, he spoke to his brother, Governor Jeb Bush, in Florida within the past hour, according to a senior advisor here. And the reports are much better, they are claiming. There was a lot of discouraging news coming out of Florida. They thought early on, one advisor tells me they are making a strong comeback. They're pointing to a couple of key points. They believe that there are counties along the I-4 corridor, a lot of independence there, where the president is outperforming their own expectations. Some of these counties, Gore counties from 2000. Also in Miami-Dade County specifically, an advisor says that of the absentee ballots coming in, a third of them have been counted, and they believe at this point, they claim, are breaking heavily for the president in a county he's not likely to win. So as they look through the state, they look at the areas where Kerry has to perform exceedingly well, and they find that the president is extremely competitive, more so than they thought. They're also waiting. They don't have a lot of numbers yet from the Panhandle, which is, of course, heavy Republican territories. Won some of those counties there 2-1 back in 2000. That's where they expect a late surge as well. So they're feeling a lot better about Florida at this point. As for Ohio, spoke to an advisor just in the last 15 minutes. He called it a dead heat. Tom?
Well, Ohio is Florida's twin this year. We have Ann Thompson in Ohio. Ann, what do you have for us?
Tom, you know, those long lines that have been the hallmark of this election here in Ohio are the subject of a lawsuit tonight. The Democrats went to a federal judge about 5 o'clock tonight and said, look, people who've stood in these lines, who've been in line for more than 2 hours, ought to be offered paper ballots because there just aren't enough machines to go around. The federal judge granted the temporary restraining order for voting in Franklin and Knox counties. But I spoke to Jeff LaRue of the Franklin County Board of Elections just in the past few minutes, who said they are not issuing paper ballots to people who are in line. However, they are offering everybody who was in line at 7:30 when the polls close an opportunity to vote on the touchscreen machines tonight. In Knox County, officials over there tell us they're trying to figure out what to do. People are still in line over in Knox County. The longest line is said to have 250 people. So people in Ohio are getting a chance to vote, but at this hour, they are still doing it by machines in those 2 counties, not by the paper ballots as recommended by the federal judge.
All right, Ann Thompson, I'm going to make an assumption then that the polls have not officially closed in Ohio, and part of the rule, that one of the rules that we're going to follow tonight is that we're not going to make any kind of a projection in the state until all the polls have closed.
There are people still voting, Tom. They said at 7:30, that was when the line ended. If you came at 7:31, you don't get a chance to vote. But if you were in line at 7:30, you're going to get an opportunity to vote. The Secretary of State's office has been very definitive about that. And at this point, at this hour, people are still voting in this state.
All right, let's show you the numbers in Ohio. And as we do that, I want to remind you that Ohio is effectively 2 states, North and South. Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland and the great metropolitan areas, and then down south, there's a whole cultural differentiation It is much more like Indiana and Kentucky and West Virginia, although Ohio is unique always. We have 5% of the vote counted so far, 5% difference between the two candidates. We're just getting underway in Ohio. All right, let's go to now one of the president's principal advisors, the man who helped him so much 4 years ago, former governor of the great state of Montana, Mark Roscoe, joins us now. As you look at the map tonight, can you hear me, Governor? Are we having audio difficulties again? All right. Well, Tim Russert.
Ohio, Tom? The key has been for the Kerry campaign to emphasize the economy more there than anywhere else in the country. One simple reason. George Bush carried Ohio by 171,000 votes in the year 2000. The state has lost over 200,000 jobs. Kerry goes back to that state day in and day out and kept saying, you see, you are economically depressed because of George Bush's policy. The president came back and said, look, I know things aren't as good as you want them to be, but we're on the way back. Stay with me.
Karl Rove and company believes that cultural issues will help them in the Southeast and in the Southwest in Ohio. They think that they lost votes last time around because in the closing days of the campaign, it was disclosed that George W. Bush had had a drunk driving arrest, and that kept some cultural conservatives at home, according to Mr. Rove and his operatives. They think they'll get him back this time, and that will make the difference. Tim, we're going to go to Mark Roscoe now, the former Montana governor, who's been so helpful to the president during all this. As you look at the map, Governor Roscoe, tonight, what are the opportunities for the president that are still to be realized that are realistic in your judgment?
Well, I think that Iowa and Wisconsin and New Mexico are obviously very realistic, and we believe that we're very competitive in Michigan and Pennsylvania as well. We put out, over the course of this last weekend, there were 1.2 million people who made 18 million contacts in the various different target states. So we feel very good about the passion and the dedication and the effort with our ground game.
We've been talking here all night long, Governor, about what happens at the end of this evening, whoever wins. We have a deeply divided country based on everything that we're seeing. What would be your recommendation to the president about how he governs in the second term and any changes that you think he should make?
Well, you know, I think these have been incredibly perilous and difficult times for us as a nation. There's been a lot of soul searching. This generation, you've written about the past generation, the last greatest generation of Americans, in very poignant terms. And I think this generation, confronted with the same difficulties, of course, is searching its conscience and its soul. And it's not always easy to lead. It's not always easy to be courageous and to take that step forward. And I think that has been an issue that has been a flashpoint and a matter of great difficulty. The president's spoken to that. I think his efforts, if you take a look at how he's addressed things legislatively, even up until the last couple of weeks, he's been working in a bipartisan way. Everything that's been accomplished in substantial detail has been the result of bipartisanship, and he has sought that at every occasion. My expectation would be that if he's reelected, he will make every genuine effort to once again re-engage in a partnership with Congress and with members from both sides of the aisle to get good things done on behalf of the American people. I think you'll see it reflected in his language and in his actions.
You resisted his overtures to join his administration for the first term. Would you be interested in joining the administration in a second term?
You know, that seems so presumptuous of me to even think of such a thing, and of course I know it would be terribly bad manners, and we're so far away from that particular moment, I couldn't even speculate about terribly bad manners, and we're so far away from that particular moment, I couldn't even speculate about it. But my intentions are to go back into the private practice of law. That's clearly what I'm presuming at the present moment.
All right, thanks very much.
I'd like to join you in Montana. That's what I'd really like to do.
We'd both like to be there at some point. Thanks very much. Former Montana Governor Mark Roscoe, always getting a plug for his state. Thanks for being with us tonight. We're going to show you the map now, both electronically and otherwise. Here's how we stand at this hour. 112 electoral votes for John Kerry, 156 for George Bush, red for the president, blue for John Kerry, and on the Rockefeller skating rink. The celebrated tourist attraction here in New York. That's how it is filling in, and no melting of the lines so far. It's going to be a long night, and down there it'll be a slightly chilly one, and it'll be even colder for whoever loses this election, obviously. I've reached that metaphor, but I stress that metaphor as far as I can. Let's go to a commercial now. As I say, we'll be back with more from Democracy Plaza. Decision 2004, right after this. We're back. Democracy Plaza, Decision 2004. The exit polls are telling us why people voted the way they did tonight. We're still awaiting the results in those key states, especially Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, and now into the upper Midwest, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa coming up in the next half hour. We'll be going to the Southwest as well. Both candidates still short of the 270 needed. This is a big-time chess game for the most powerful office in the world. What were the voters saying to us tonight as they came out of the polls, Brian Williams?
Let's go to Pennsylvania, Tom. You'll note still white on our board, no color assigned. It's a big battleground state. We've been talking about 21 electoral votes. In 2000, it went to Al Gore by a very slim margin. Now it's too early to make a call in the state, but our exit polls are telling us what Pennsylvanians were thinking about as they voted. President Bush drawing strong support from several groups there. Over 60% of gun owners, white Protestants, residents of the central and northern parts of Pennsylvania. Senator Kerry drew his strongest support from young voters, over 60%. Union households, also over 60%. Black voters and Philadelphia residents, 84% each. Those 4 counties around Philly deliver 1/5 of the vote for the entire state. Now to the issues. Pennsylvania voters concerned with terrorism or moral values were especially likely to go with the president. 83% who said terrorism was the issue that mattered to them voted for the president. 81% of those who selected moral values as their primary concern went with George W. Bush. For John Kerry, the war in Iraq, health care, jobs, and the economy, those core issues in the central part of that state, those were the 3 that worked for him. Among Pennsylvania voters who said the war in Iraq was the most important issue, 75% voted for John Kerry, as did 83% who selected health care, 84% who said the economy and jobs most important to them. So some interesting internal numbers coming out of a crucial state tonight. Tom?
Thanks for Brian Williams. I'm just looking at some numbers from Ohio. They are a absolute reflection of what you were just reporting from the state of Ohio about why people voted the way they did and for which candidate. We've got a number of Senate races now that we're able to project winners in. Let's begin in the state of Arizona. One of the most popular political figures in the country, John McCain. No surprise, going back to the United States Senate. Well, he'll be a burr under the saddle of both parties. And Sam Brownback, a man who feels very strongly about refugee problems around the world, going back from the state of Kansas. Byron Morgan from the state of North Dakota, a state that goes big for him and big for George Bush. In New York, Chuck Schumer, who had $26 million in the bank and had more than a few advertisements on the air going back. Wisconsin, Russ Feingold, one of the authors of the Feingold-McCain Campaign Finance Reform, being returned. Blanche Lincoln from the state of Arkansas, that stays in the Democratic column. No pickup among Democrats in the United States Senate in that run as well. Can we show you what's going on in the state of Kentucky? We've got a very tight race down there. Jim Bunning, the Hall of Fame baseball player, is virtually in a dead heat now with a man who was essentially unknown in Kentucky politics until about 6 weeks ago. But Jim Bunning, who was a big-time pitcher in both the National and the American League, made a number of campaign gaffes that I think that it's fair to say. Almost 90% of the vote is in. We've got a race that has 10,000 votes, less than that actually, between these two. Daniel Mangriardo was just unknown in Kentucky, Tim, until about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, Tom, it was quite interesting to watch. There was a debate between the 2 candidates, and Senator Bunning did not return home for the debate. He went to the Republican National Committee headquarters in Washington, and it later learned he was using a teleprompter as a help, if you will, during the course of the debate. He also said he didn't read newspapers or watch television news, and has created a big stir. The president landed in Cincinnati, Ohio the other day, invited Senator Bunning and his wife to greet him on Air Force One, hoping that photo-op would be worth 10,000 votes, and maybe it is the margin of difference tonight. We don't know. Still 10% of the vote left to count. An amazingly too close to call race in Kentucky. That's a big surprise for the Republicans. 1 month ago, they thought they had a lock on that seat.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that turns out. We'll be watching that all night long. Joe Lockhart joined the John Kerry campaign this fall. He's a former presidential press secretary to Bill Clinton. He joins us now. Joe, as you look at the map, where are the opportunities for Senator Kerry to get the 270 electoral votes that he needs?
Well, I mean, obviously, all eyes are on Ohio and Florida. We think there's opportunity out in the Southwest with New Mexico and Nevada, and obviously the upper Midwest with Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota.
What about Pennsylvania? The polls have been closed there for some time, and going into this evening, we were told that you were in pretty good shape in Pennsylvania.
I think we were. I think we entered with a pretty good lead. We had a very good get-out-the-vote operation in that state. We went back to that state over and over again. So I think when all the votes are counted, we will have won Pennsylvania.
Joe, you've always put it very straight with us. As you look at the map tonight, what are your principal concerns about the states apart from Florida and Ohio where you may run into some difficulties?
Well, you know, listen, I think the president made a tactical decision about a month ago. He went 20 days without going to Ohio and concentrated on the upper Midwest. We spent a lot of time and effort in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. We think we did enough. We think we'll win those states, but the president spent an awful lot of time and money in those states. So, I mean, those were states that we had to work very hard for.
All right, thanks very much, Joe Lockhart with the Kerry campaign in Massachusetts. More from Democracy Plaza, Decision 2004, right after this. We're back at Democracy Plaza. The big question tonight, what's going on in the state of Ohio, also Pennsylvania, but Ohio is on everyone's mind. We want to go to our decision desk area now. NBC's Lester Holt is standing by there. Lester, what are they telling you?
Well, Tom, an equal measure of good and bad news for the campaigns regarding Ohio. The decision desk says it could be a while because they have two models right now. One shows the race going President Bush's way, the other going Senator Kerry's way right now. Two distinct models showing very, very different results right now. It could be a while, Tom.
All right, Lester, we also want to remind our audience, of course, that there are people still voting in the state of Ohio, and we're not going to make a call in that state until everyone has finished their voting. They were in line at 7:30, and election officials decided that they could stay in line and vote on the touch screens that Ann Thompson talked about earlier. Ohio has been, of course, one of the contentious states in terms of legal challenges to voting there about whether you could have monitors in the polling places and so on. It's not going to get any bigger than Ohio tonight. With 20 electoral votes, it is a traditional Republican state. It is the home of the Taft family, and no Republican, you've heard this 100 times, no Republican has ever been elected president without the state of Ohio. And George Bush did everything but put wheels under the White House and move it to Canton, Ohio in the course of the last year and a half. More from Democracy Plaza, Decision 2004, after this. You kept hearing all campaign long, this is going to be very close. It is proving to be that indeed on this election night. We now have 438 electoral votes outstanding. Polls have closed in states representing that number. Still not a president of the United States. There are the columns on 30 Rockefeller Plaza. President Bush in red, John Kerry in blue. The outstanding states remain Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, and we're now moving into the upper Midwest as well. We're able to call the state of Louisiana, no surprise, that was always in the Bush column, 9 electoral votes there. Also the state of Mississippi, as the South stays solid Republican, 6 electoral votes in the state of Mississippi. That's what the map looked like a moment ago as we color in the neighboring states of Mississippi and Louisiana. George Bush goes up to 171, John Kerry to 112. Everyone thought going into this one, John Kerry to 112. Everyone thought going into this election night that the two candidates were at about 222 for the president and about 207 for John Kerry. Missouri is too close to call. As you can see, 12% of the vote has been counted there. Also too close to call, New Hampshire, a critical state for the Bush campaign. 1/4 of the vote has been counted, just a handful of votes between them. In Florida, 55% of the vote has been counted thus far, almost 300,000 votes between them. But again, we remind you, that depends on where those votes are coming in from. In the state of Ohio, they're just beginning to get their count underway. 38,000 votes between them, 10% of the vote in. Cuyahoga County in the north will be the key for John Kerry, and down south in the southeast and southwest, that will be the key for President Bush. Let's go to NBC's Ron Allen now, who is out there in Ohio. Ron?
Good evening, Tom. Yes, we're in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland, and behind me you can see they're starting to count ballots the old-fashioned way, paper ballots. This Ohio, as I understand it, of all the swing states, has the largest percentage of paper punch card ballots, about 70%. The returns have been trickling in. So far, about 56,000 votes for John Kerry, about 31,000 for President Bush. But as you pointed out, this is a county where the Democrats hope to run up a lot of votes. In 2000, President Bush won 72 of the 88 counties in Ohio. He didn't win here, but he still won the state, which gives you an idea of the imbalance between Democrats and Republicans throughout the state. Turnout here is expected to be very high. The chairman of the Board of Elections earlier said that he thought it could reach 70%. There were long lines throughout the day despite the rain here. Again, the returns are trickling in. The other big issue here has, of course, been these challengers, poll monitors inside the polling places. Despite all the concerns leading up to the election, all the reports that we have heard here suggest that it's been very smooth. There have been no problems. There was one incident where a Republican challenger was asked to leave a polling place, but for the most part, there have been none of the confrontations that were feared. Things going smoothly, turnout very high, and it looks like it's going to be a very, very late night here. Tom?
All right, thanks very much, NBC's Ron Allen. You know, a moment ago, Tim, I was tempted to say that the President of the United States probably has already been elected. We just don't know it yet. But in fact, with Iowa and Nevada still outstanding, there are some big what-ifs out there with this checkerboard that we're playing on.
Tom, it's amazing. You know, we've talked repeatedly about 270 votes needed in order to be elected President of the United States. George Bush, if he won all the states he won in 2000, would have 278. Let's just assume that John Kerry successfully picks off Ohio and New Hampshire. That would bring President Bush down to 254. Where does he find those remaining 16? This is what the campaigns are telling me. They say easy. We'll take Pennsylvania. That's 21. Or we'll take Wisconsin and Minnesota together. That'll give us 20. Or we can take Minnesota and Iowa, 17. That gets us there. The two best states for Bush, they think, is Iowa and New Mexico. That's 7 and 5. That doesn't get him there. But what we know about John Kerry is this number includes Bush winning Florida. If you take away the 20 in Ohio, that puts George Bush up to 274, even giving John Kerry New Hampshire. John Kerry must win either Ohio or Florida, or it's very hard to get him to 270.
All right, Tim Russert doing his magic math once again. This year electronically. Let's go to NBC's David Gregory and hear what they're saying at the White House at this hour. David?
Well, Tom, just moments ago, the president summoned the travel pool, the small group of reporters, up to the residence. Quite unusual to get a visit up into the residence because he wants to talk to the cameras. He wants to talk to the American people. Remember, 4 years ago, the president did this at a similar moment of the evening. Over to the governor's mansion in Texas. His family was there. His parents were there. He wanted to encourage people to keep getting out there and vote, not to believe that the election is over one way or the other. This tracks quite exactly with the ground game operation they've got going right now. They have been talking to volunteers in swing states to tell them to keep people energized, to keep people going to the polls. This becomes more important as you move across the time zones. Remember, some of those big swing states, Gore states from 2000 that they have their eye on, like New Mexico, that they think that they've got a real good shot with. Now he only lost by 366 votes. So, again, the president is going to call the travel pool up. We expect that he may even be taking some questions at the moment. And at the same time, getting some information out of Ohio. They feel like Florida, they are starting to track in a much better direction. In Columbus, in Franklin County, a senior advisor told me that they are outperforming by 4 points where they were in 2000. A small sign in still a dead-even race. Tom, we'll let you know when we get more from the president.
All right, thanks very much, NBC David Gregory. We're getting into tricky territory there with the president speaking from the family quarters to the television cameras when polls are still open in the states of Iowa, Nevada. Those are two key states in this election. Out west, Hawaii is in play. These are states that could make a difference for the president, and he obviously wants to encourage his voters to get out there. Let's go to NBC's Kelly O'Donnell now, who's covering the Kerry campaign up in Massachusetts, and the number 2 man on the So we'll see what the senator says if he sees President Bush going on television before the polls close in some of these key states, whether he'll appear or not. We'll be back with more Democracy Plaza, Decision 2004, right after this. Earlier in this campaign, about 2 weeks ago, we started talking about the trifecta in the eastern seaboard, the states of Florida, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. No one tonight has been able to cash a ticket in any of those states, and that's why the election results remain outstanding. 84% of the vote has been counted in the state of Florida. As you can see, George W. Bush is still in advance. That's a very significant number. 64%, about two-thirds, not 84%. That would be a big difference, obviously. But George Bush holding a lead there. In the state of Pennsylvania, where John Kerry had high hopes that he would win, almost 20% of the vote has been counted thus far, and John Kerry is trending very heavily now, but we don't know where that vote is coming from. We're still not able to make a projection based on the models that we have. And in Ohio, 15% of the vote has been counted. The difference between them, 46,000 votes, too close to call. It's northern Ohio against southern Ohio. And we're joined now by Bob Taft, who is the Republican governor, a member of that distinguished Republican family in the state of Ohio. Governor, how long do you think it'll be before we'll be able to have a sense of what your state has decided today?
I think it's going to be pretty late tonight, Tom. You know, we had long lines at the polls. A number of people were voting well after 7:30, so I think it's going to be a very late night here in Ohio and probably a very close race.
Have you?
Polls been closed in the Wisconsin for quite some time. We're not in a position to say how we think it's going to go. With Iowa, it looks like it's going to be well into the day tomorrow, given the machine problems, quote unquote, that they had. New Mexico with 5 electoral votes, Nevada with 5, and Hawaii with 4, also in the yet to be settled category as far as our CBS News projections are concerned. Now we're going to take a slight break here in a moment to let some stations who may have been away rejoin us. Don't go away. We'll be right back. It's the morning after Election Day, but it ain't over till it's over, and it ain't over yet. Michigan has just slid into the Kerry column by our estimate. That, by our projections, give the senator 238 electoral votes. President Bush, with 249, by our estimate, is just 21 electoral votes shy of re-election, but that could prove to be, please underscore the word, could prove to be a very tough 21 to get. Standing in President Bush's way, among other things, but primarily Ohio. If he could win Ohio, he'd be there. But it's uncertain at this hour when anybody's going to know how Ohio's gone. Now, you may be saying, well, listen, I saw someplace else somebody had Ohio in President Bush's category. They're entitled to do that, but we say again, we said coming into tonight, we'd rather be last than to be wrong. We don't want to be wrong about Ohio. If it takes a day or more to settle Ohio, so be it. Our position is that we just don't feel comfortable estimating it at this moment. Now, let's add them up. With 270 electoral votes needed to win, our estimate is that President Bush has 249, Kerry has 238, 270 needed to win. The states in white are where the polls have closed. The polls have closed everywhere now, but where we have not projected a winner as yet. Ohio, the big one, with 20 electoral votes. Wisconsin with 10. Iowa with 7. Look out on Iowa because, as Mika Brzezinski and Ed Bradley have been saying, looks like Iowa has machine problems. Aren't going to know how those 7 electoral votes go until sometime at least fairly deep into tomorrow. New Mexico, which went for Gore the last time by a paper-thin margin. 5 electoral votes there. President Bush might wind up carrying it. Who can say? Nevada, which President Bush carried the last time, 5 electoral votes. The Democrats like to think they have a chance there. Out in Hawaii, 4 electoral votes. We still have it in the white, meaning we can't estimate, not going to estimate how it's going to go. The Republicans like to think that they have a chance there. Now, in the race to control the Senate some time ago, Leslie Stahl has said, well, listen, the Republicans are definitely going to control the next Senate. It's only a question by how many are they going to votes they're going to have control. The Republicans will control the House of Representatives. By how many seats? Unclear. One guess, and it's a guess, maybe 24 or 30 seats. We'll just have to see. I want to show you something on the reporter's notebook because it may put things in some perspective for you. We keep writing down on our pad over here, my old reporter's notepad, well, okay, Ohio. And that's pretty much where things are. However, on this electronic gadget which they've given me here, Bush needs 21, Kerry needs 32. Now, follow me through here, because if John Kerry should wind up carrying Ohio's 20 electoral votes, if in the end Ohio gets colored blue, George Bush could still win the election. He could still win. He would need, George Bush would need then, to pick up Wisconsin with 10 electoral votes, Iowa with 7, and then George Bush would need to carry either New Mexico and its 5 or Nevada and its 5. So George Bush is in the position that even if he loses Ohio, there is a way. A lot of people say, well, it's not very likely he's going to win Wisconsin and Ohio and then pick up either Nevada or New Mexico, but it's possible. George Bush could lose Ohio's 20 electoral votes and still win. For John Kerry, just not going to happen. If he doesn't win Ohio, that's the reason that the Kerry people are so fixed on Ohio. So that's one way of looking at the race so far. Jim Axelrod in Boston at Kerry headquarters has more on John Edwards' appearance there some minutes ago. One thing, Jim Axelrod, you know, we didn't see as much of John Edwards during the campaign or during this election day as a lot of people thought we were. The Republicans sort of taunted him by saying if he doesn't show up soon, we're going to put his picture on milk cartons so we can find him. But he's the man they send out tonight to carry their heavy wood for them.
Yeah, and in 1 minute and 17 seconds, Dan, he may have just absolutely said the most important thing that anyone said all night as far as the candidates go. I want to review for you when he was saying it's been a long night, waited 4 years for the victory, we can wait one more night. Essentially, you've heard the phrase, the generals are always fighting the last war. Well, politicians do that as well. He was clearly staking out ground in the event that this thing will then move to the courts. And as he concluded his comments, he said, we have said clearly along every step of this campaign, every vote would count and every vote would be counted. Again, Dan, 1 minute and 17 seconds by my clock from the minute he walked out on stage to the minute he walked off. But he said everything he needed to in terms of staking out the turf that the Kerry Edwards campaign will guard jealously if that's their last hope to win. Dan?
Jim Axelrod live in Boston. We go to Wyatt Andrews, CBS News correspondent in Washington, who's with some of the voices and some of the loud talk coming from the Republicans down the headquarters down there. Wyatt, what have you learned? What are you hearing?
Dan, just a few minutes ago, we got confirmation that Republicans think they have this election. Ed Gillespie, who is the chairman of the Republican National Committee, came out a few minutes ago to explain the math as the Republicans see it. He said they believe that President Bush has a 123,000 vote lead in Ohio. And he said there are 130,000 provisional ballots out there.
Excuse me, Wyatt Andrews, I have to interrupt you here because our CBS News estimate is that John Kerry, when all the votes are encountered, will have carried Hawaii and gotten Hawaii's 4 electoral votes. You recall that Vice President Dick Cheney flew out to Hawaii hoping to turn what has generally speaking been a Democratic bastion of support in presidential elections Republicans' way, not going to be. Now, the significance is that moves in our estimates John Kerry up to 242, George Bush with 249, with 270 needed to win. Now, you know, if this thing gets any closer, somebody's going to have to call 911, call the police, call a nurse, call somebody, because it's, 19 minutes before 3 o'clock in the morning here in New York, and everybody's focused down on Ohio, but as states like Hawaii drop into Kerry's column, Kerry is creeping up on George Bush. Still advantage Bush, any way you cut it. Better likelihood that Bush will wind up winning than Kerry, but as Wyatt Andrews is reporting from Washington, the Republicans have already done their arithmetic, and they believe they have it won. Wyatt, pick it up from there again, please.
Dan, I was just about to explain, they think that of those 130,000 provisional ballots, Ed Gillespie, chairman of the Republican National Committee, claims that probably only 30,000 of those will be actual valid votes. So they think they have Ohio. That gives them, in their minds, 269, and they are waiting in this hall for one more state that would, in their minds, ice the election.
Well, they could get that one more state provided. Thank you, Wyatt. They could get that one more state. Wyatt Andrews is saying, well, the Republicans are saying, listen, we've got Ohio. Provisional ballots or no provisional ballots, they have their own mathematical equation. You can bet the Democrats have theirs. Look, there's a lot of gaming going on here now to get public perception, to get the strongest image of who's won the election, and this is bound to go on well into tomorrow. But follow it through here. The Republicans are saying, listen, we've got Ohio. And when it's settled that we get Ohio, provisional ballots or not, that will put us at 269. And they believe we can get the votes to put them over the 270 mark by getting either New Mexico's 5 or Nevada's 5 or possibly Iowa's 7. Iowa's had machine problems. Again, not likely to know how Iowa's going to go until at least well into tomorrow. And, of course, Wisconsin's 10 are still out there. So that's the reason that the Republicans profess to be as confident as they appear to be about why they're going to win the election. Bob Schieffer.
I just got off the phone with the White House, Dan. They are absolutely confident that they have won. They say in Ohio, 97% of the vote by their count is in. They say they have a 126,000 vote lead there. They say it's now down to nickels and dimes. I ask about, well, what about this 130,000 provisional ballots that are out there? They say with the lead they have, that every one of those ballots would have to be accepted and everyone would have to be for carry if they were to be, if they were to count. They say just flatly they have won. If they were to count. They say just flatly they have won. Now, they also say that they believe that they're almost certain they're going to win New Mexico. They say they have a big lead out there by their count. They also say that at the end of the night that Nevada will go their way. I'm reporting what they told me, and they are absolutely confident that they've won Ohio. They say the victory will come either when the results from New Mexico come in or when the results from Nevada come in.
Well, hope is sometimes father of the wish. Who can say? We'll be back with our CBS News election coverage in just a few moments. Back at CBS News election headquarters with 270 electoral votes needed to win. Our estimate is Kerry has 242. That includes a turnover for the Democrats, a pickup, if you will, in New Hampshire by our estimate, and we estimate that George Bush has 249. Now, the White House is selling hard, saying they're absolutely convinced that they have won the election, and here's their reasoning. Whether you choose to believe it or not, whether you think it's spin or not, here's what the White House, the George Bush campaign headquarters people at the highest levels say. They say that in Ohio, 20 electoral votes there, everybody agrees that John Kerry cannot win if he doesn't carry Ohio. That is the Republicans' contention that with these votes actually in and counted, that George Bush has enough of a lead over John Kerry, over 100,000 vote lead, well over 100,000 vote lead over John Kerry, that with maybe 175 provisional ballots, that's the outside number, it's followed through here, that the White House Bush campaign argument is that John Kerry would have to get virtually all of the provisional ballots in order to even come within shouting distance of George Bush, and that goes their reasoning is why they are so confident, quote unquote, that they're going to win. Again, take it for whatever it may be. On the other side, the John Kerry people, John Edwards, the vice president nominee, coming out and saying, you know, whoa, hold it. We said going in that every vote was going to count, and we will make sure that every vote gets counted. Their whole focus is on Ohio, and those provisional ballots by law, as we understand it, we could be corrected, but John Turley, who doesn't miss much, says those provisional ballots in Ohio cannot even be counted for at least 8 or 10 days. Now, Ohio isn't the only state with provisional ballots. We're going to go to Anthony Mason in a minute to get him to tell us about what's happening in some other states. But right now, Ed Bradley, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, here are the numbers. I mean, if there are 175,000 provisional ballots out there, and the Kerry people were saying that most of them come from black wards in Cincinnati and Cleveland, and they think they can get 75 to 85% of those votes. If they get 75% of them, that's 131,000 votes. So that's enough to put them back in the ball game. Here's where the White House's optimism comes in other states. In Nevada, 80% of the vote is counted. Bush has a 13,000 vote lead. New Mexico, 94% of the vote counted, the president leading by 30,000 votes. In Iowa, 97% counted, and Bush has an 11,500 vote lead.
Well, that would be the reason the White House says that we're confident we're going to win it. However, let's pull back here again, take a little breath. We try to deal with what we consider to be the best available information. We understand that Karl Rove, and by the way, it should be noted, whatever you think of Karl Rove, that the road is littered with the carcasses of people's reputations who said, well, Karl Rove doesn't know what he's talking about. He frequently does know what he's talking about. However, Karl Rove and the others are making this argument that, look, any way you cut it, the election is over. You can choose to believe that or not. Now, you mentioned Nevada, Bradley. Anthony Mason points out that Nevada is another state with provisional ballots. The question, Anthony, is, are there enough provisional ballots out there to make a big difference?
Well, Dan, we'll have to see, of course, by the end of the night what the final total is. In Nevada, which has been very close all night, Bush has pulled away a little bit here. But there are an estimated 3,200 provisional ballots just in Clark County alone. That's where Las Vegas is located. Now, they could become the target of a legal battle over Nevada's 5 electoral votes if there was to be a second front here in any effect in terms of legal challenges. Now, Bush carried this state in 2000 by about 7,000 votes. And the way the electoral math is coming down with the Democrats, with John Edwards saying they plan to fight over every vote, as I say, this could become a second front possibly in the battle to get 270 or more electoral votes, Dan.
The second front possibly, conceivably, being in Nevada, where they do have a considerable number of provisional ballots given the total number of votes cast. Well, again, let's pause. Advantage George Bush, clearly. 249 electoral votes we estimate he has. John Kerry with 242, 270 needed to win. However, with Ohio being the principal battleground, you've heard the Karl Rove, George W. Bush campaign argument of why they think that Ohio is what in political terms we call a gut cinch for them. We'll have to see. Wisconsin with 10 electoral votes is still out. Iowa's had machine problems, 7 electoral votes. But in the actual votes counted last time I looked, correct me if I'm wrong here, Bob, I believe that George Bush was leading in Iowa. Now, in actual votes counted, Bush is also leading in New Mexico with 5 and Nevada with 5. That's one advantage Bush, but it's not over. That's where things stand. We'll have more for you after we take this break on these CBS stations. Dan Rather at CBS News Election News Headquarters in New York with Ed Bradley, Bob Schieffer, Leslie Stahl, Mika Brzezinski, and John Roberts. Stay right here with us. Keep it where it is. We'll be right back with you. Back at CBS News Election News Headquarters in New York. In football terms, you might say that for George Bush, it's first and goal from a yard out. Sometimes that turns out to be a very tough yard. With the states hanging out there, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa, New Mexico, and Nevada. That if George Bush carries Ohio, that's it. If John Kerry in the end, and keep in mind again, it may be some days before we can say with any certainty who has carried Ohio. Yes, people can estimate it one way or the other, but we learned from our experience in Florida the last time out that we're going to be very, very careful when states get in contention as Ohio is now. It's a somewhat different situation in Florida the last time, but it's similar in this regard that lawyers are swarming over Ohio like locusts. And there are going to be more of them tomorrow and more of them the day after. So when that begins to happen, you know, who knows how it's going to go out. But come back to the point that George Bush could win even if he doesn't wind up carrying Ohio. Keep in mind, they're absolutely teetotally, me-mortally convinced they're going to carry Ohio, but if they don't, George Bush could still win by getting Wisconsin and Iowa and either Nevada or New Mexico. So that's pretty much where things stand at the moment. Leslie Stahl, what about that South Dakota Senate race? Any decision there yet? Tom Daschle and Thune?
It's just like the presidential race. I call it the OBR, the other big race, and it's 6 hours after the polls close. We cannot tell you, we cannot predict who's going to win. Look at that. 94% of the precincts in. John Thune, the former Republican congressman, has a slight lead in the tabulated vote, but we are not ready to say which candidate's going to win. And it's incredible because George Bush we believe is going to carry South Dakota by 61%, so that's a pretty enormous tide that Tom Daschle is fighting against. Of course, he has been in Congress half his life. He is the Senate leader of the Democrats, so that's not so surprising. Let me tell you also about Florida. We haven't had a result in Florida.
Now, that's for the Democratic seat being vacated by Bob Graham, who's retiring.
Exactly. And what you have in that state is a situation where Mel Martinez, who the White House leaned on and pressured to run because they thought he's a Hispanic, they thought he would pump up the Hispanic vote to help President Bush. But Betty Castor, the former state education commissioner and a college president, is giving him one hell of a run, and we are not prepared at this point to say what's going to happen there. Bob Graham, very popular, campaigned with Betty Castor, and that may have helped her chances, and we just don't know. There's one other Senate race still outstanding that's up in Alaska. The Republican incumbent, Lisa Murkowski, looks by the tabulated vote with 64% of the precincts in to have a comfortable lead, but we are not prepared yet to say whether she will hold on to her seat against Tony Knowles, the former governor. She got into a lot of trouble because her father appointed her to that seat, and people in the state didn't like that. She has these lawn signs with her, and people in the state didn't like that. She has these lawn signs with her name, Lisa, this big, and Murkowski that big, so people can't be reminded that Murkowski, her father, the governor, who has become quite unpopular, put her in the seat.
Alaska, South Dakota, and Florida unsolved in the Senate races, but the Republicans will definitely control the Senate next time. Only question I made. Let me show you some votes actually in and counted after we tap the map once again. 207 needed to win. We estimate George Bush has 249, Kerry 242. The states in white, we have not estimated either way, Ohio being the big one, 20 electoral votes there. If John Kerry wins that one, he's in the hunt. If he loses it, say goodbye. In Iowa, this is the votes in and counted in Iowa. They've had machine trouble in Iowa. We've mentioned several times, means that we aren't going to really know how Iowa turns out until tomorrow, but 98% of the precincts in and reporting. That's the way the actual vote count looks. Out in Nevada, Anthony Mason mentioned that George Bush has opened up a bit of a lead in Nevada, perhaps enough to win the 5 electoral votes out there. That's with 82 of the precincts reporting. But cautionary note, those provisional ballots, which may become the chads of this election year, provisional ballots could be a factor in Nevada. In New Mexico, land of enchantment is a land of mystery tonight, 5 electoral votes. Nobody knows how it's going to go, but again, George Bush has a lead over John Kerry, and in the votes in and counted with 96% of the precincts in, that lead has been increasing somewhat. In Wisconsin, and the Badger State, 10 electoral votes frequently goes the way Minnesota's gone, and we think Minnesota has gone to Kerry. Kerry leads in Minnesota with 92% of the precincts in and their votes counted. That's the way it looks. In Ohio, the big one of the evening, with its 20 electoral votes, this is the way the votes in and counted looks at the moment. George Bush, with 98% of the precincts in and counted, leads in Ohio, but remember that they believe that there are maybe 175,000 provisional ballots in Ohio which can't be counted for 8 or 10 days. Dan Rather at CBS News Election Headquarters in New York. We'll talk to you in a few minutes.
Or is it going to be now's the time for healing?
Teresa Heinz Kerry walking into Faneuil Hall with a round of applause
her friends, her supporters, her family there as well, her son right next to her. This is a moment where the Carys and the Edwards, I haven't seen the Edwards side of this family. Have you seen them yet, Jeff, on these pictures?
No, I haven't. I just want to point out that there might be talk of reconciliation and we're all in this together, but very soon it appears that the President of the United States will have his first chance to name a Supreme Court justice. Chief Justice Rehnquist appears to be seriously, if not gravely ill. That fight has been in rehearsal for 4 years in Washington, with liberal interest groups and conservative interest groups kind of practicing their techniques on district and federal court nominees. This president has not had a chance to appoint one justice because there hasn't been a vacancy. And again, at the risk of making a prediction, which I can't stand, that battle over a Supreme Court nominee with a more Republican Senate is going to be a barn burner.
All right, Kerry has been introduced now. He's walking in. Senator Kerry is going to get a strong, strong round of applause. Here he is, John Kerry and John Edwards. John Edwards walking up first, John Kerry following. They're going to be speaking. We don't know how long, how short, what they'll say. I assume John Edwards will speak first, introduce John Kerry, but then again, we don't know. We haven't been told, but that's what the assumption is. Edwards speaks first, Kerry speaks second, and then we'll listen and we'll wait and we'll see. This is a difficult moment for any politicians. Am I right, Judy and Jeff? John, if you can help me. This is only the second political contest that John Kerry has lost?
That's right. That's right.
Early in his career, he lost a race.
Race for Congress, then he elected lieutenant governor. And one thing that's very difficult for these people to do is not to give their campaign speeches.
Let's see.
They've given them 500 times. It's in their blood at this point. The tape's in their head.
All right, let's listen to John Edwards speak first, and he'll be followed by John Kerry. This team has been together now for some time. They worked extremely hard up till the last moment, doing as best as they could. They had millions and millions of dollars in support, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of volunteers. They had what so many Democratic politicians and strategists thought were so many issues running in their favor, whether it was the economy, which had faltered, the war in Iraq, but not to be.
But you know their hearts are breaking.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it was a long night and a long morning. And even though the outcome won't change, I want you to know that we will continue to fight for every vote. Because every vote matters in our America. And we will honor each one of you who stood with us and who stood in line to change your country. We believe in you. We didn't start fighting for you when this campaign began, and we won't stop fighting for you when this campaign ends. Your cause will always be our cause, and nothing makes John and me prouder than standing with all of you. In this hour, I'm held up by the love of my life, Elizabeth, and by our beautiful children, and I draw great strength by standing with the man I fought alongside with the last 4 months, his beautiful wife, Teresa, and his wonderful daughters and sons. John Kerry is a great American. to be a part of the most important election of our lifetime, and to fight for so many things of value and consequence. It was nothing short of an honor to work with such a kind, caring, and remarkable man. You cannot fight 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, unless you love America. And John loves this country. In this campaign, we worked hard, and we hoped that the results would be different. And I want to talk to the tens of millions of people who worked alongside us, who believed in our cause, and who stood with us. You can be disappointed, but you cannot walk away. This fight has just begun. Together, we will carry on, and we will be with you every step of the way. You stood in line for 10 hours because you want your government to stand up for you. You stood in the rain to vote because you want to build one America. You missed classes, field hockey, soccer practices. You stood for hours and hours to let your voices be heard. Well, we heard you, and I want you to hear me. This campaign may end today, but the battle for you and the hardworking Americans who built this country rages on. The battle rages for the factory worker and the mill worker who says, I want to work, I just want a job. The battle rages on for the mother who sits in the emergency room with her daughter and wonders how she's going to pay the bill. The battle rages on for the young person who's worked hard and wants to go to college but doesn't have the money to pay for it. It goes on for the young child who doesn't understand why they're treated differently just because of the color of their skin. And it rages on for the mother who wants to know why her son was sent over there and will not come home. This fight will continue in our homes and in our union halls, in our churches and in our schools, in our offices and over the internet. We will keep marching toward that one America, and we're not going to stop until we get there. You know, I've learned a lot of lessons in my life. Two of the most important are that first, there will always be heartache and struggle. You can't make it go away. But the other is that people of good and strong will can make a difference. And we can make a difference. Rest assured, we will make a difference. One lesson is a sad lesson, but the other lesson is inspiring. And we are Americans, and so we choose to be inspired. We choose to be inspired because we know we can do better, because this is America, where everything is still possible. And at the end of our heartache today resides an eternal hope for the country we're going to fight for and the country we're going to build together. Ladies and gentlemen, the man who never surrendered his hopes and dreams for the country he loves so much, Senator John Kerry.
Thank you so much. You just have no idea how warming and how generous that welcome is, your love is, your affection, and I'm gratified by it. I'm sorry that we got here a little bit late and a little bit short. Earlier today, I spoke to President Bush and I offered him and Laura our congratulations on their victory. We had a good conversation, and we talked about the danger of division in our country and the need, the desperate need for unity, for finding the common ground, coming together. Today, I hope that we can begin the healing. In America, it is vital that every vote count and that every vote be counted. But the outcome should be decided by voters, not a protracted legal process. I would not give up this fight if there was a chance that we would prevail. But it is now clear that even when all the provisional ballots are counted, which they will be, there won't be enough outstanding votes for us to be able to win Ohio. And therefore, we cannot win this election. My friends, it was here that we began our campaign for the presidency. And all we had was hope and a vision for a better America. It was a privilege and a gift to spend 2 years traveling this country, coming to know so many of you. I wish that I could just wrap you up in my arms and embrace each and every one of you individually all across this nation. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We still got your back.
Thank you, man. And I assure you, you watch, I'll still love yours. So, hang in there. I will always be particularly grateful to the colleague that you just heard from who became my partner, my very close friend, an extraordinary leader, John Edwards. And I thank him for everything he did. And I just, John and I would be the first to tell you that we owe so much to our families. They're here with us today. They were with us every single step of the way. They sustained us. They went out on their own and they multiplied our campaign all across this country. No one did this more with grace and with courage and candor that I love than my wife, Teresa. And I thank her. And our children were there every single step of the way. It was unbelievable. Vanessa, Alex, Chris, Andre, and John from my family, and Elizabeth Edwards, who is so remarkable and so strong and so smart. And Johnny and Kate, who went out there on her own just like my daughters did, and also Emma, Claire, and Jack, who were up beyond their bedtime last night, like a lot of us. I want to thank my crewmates and my friends from 35 years ago, that great band of brothers who crisscrossed this country on my behalf through 2004. They had the courage to speak the truth back then, and they spoke it again this year, and for that I will forever be grateful. And thanks also, as I look around here, to friends and family of a lifetime, some from college, friends made all across the years, and then all across the miles of this campaign. You are so special. You brought the gift of your passion for our country and the possibilities of change, and that will stay with us and with this country forever. Thanks to Democrats and Republicans and independents who stood with us, and everyone who voted, no matter who their candidate was. And thanks to my absolutely unbelievable, dedicated staff led by a wonderful campaign manager, Mary Beth Cahill, who did an extraordinary job. There's so much written about campaigns, and there's so much that Americans never get to see. I wish they could all spend a day on a campaign and see how hard these folks work to make America better. It is its own unbelievable contribution to our democracy, and it's a gift to everybody, but especially to me. And I'm grateful to each and every one of you. And I thank your families, and I thank you for the sacrifices you've made. And to all the volunteers all across this country who gave so much of themselves. You know, thanks to William Field, a 6-year-old who collected $680, a quarter and a dollar at a time, selling bracelets during the summer to help change America. Thanks to